Namaskar, you're watching Budget Campus exclusively. Doordarshan News brings it to you from the sprawling campus of ISB Hyderabad, ranked 29th in the world by Financial Times. And today on the show, we are going to talk about the big budget. Remember, this budget is pitched as historical in the sense that first, the timings of its presentation, 1st of Feb, it's going to be presented. Secondly, for the first time ever in India, railway budget is merged with general budget. Having said that, we also know that in the year 2016, government has actually introduced some macroeconomic reforms. We are talking about the rollout of GST and demonetization. And having said that, today from ISB Hyderabad, we're going to get you the voices as far as the big budget expectation narrative is concerned in the backdrop of these macroeconomic reforms, and also we'll give the sense as far as the major sectors are concerned. What does Hyderabad want and what are the voices? For example, infrastructure, banking, healthcare, digital literacy and railways, etc. And to do so, we're very glad to have on the ISB Budget Special Hyderabad panel with us. We have Milind Sohoni. He's Faculty Operations Management from ISB. Thank you very much, Milind, for being with us once again on the show. Extremely glad to have again on the show Vaidyanathan. He is resident faculty of ISB. He deals with finance here. He is visiting faculty with University of Connecticut and is also one of the consultants with the World Bank. Thank you very much, Vaidyanathan, for taking out time for us. And also very, very pleased to have Deepa Mani on the show. Deepa is Faculty Information Systems and Executive Director, Srini Tech Research also at the ISB. Deepa, a warm welcome to you as well. And also Tarun Jain, we welcome you. Tarun is Faculty in Economics and Public Policy from ISB Hyderabad. Tarun, a very, very warm welcome to you. And Milind, quickly let me start with you. And also before I go to the panelists, thank you very much ISB Hyderabad for joining us on the show. And just to set the ball rolling, Milind, let me start quickly with you to set the tone as far as this the entire expectation whole thing around this year is concerned, especially in the backdrop of the rollout of GST and demonetization. If I ask you in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the space that we are looking at, what is really expected? Is it going to be on the similar lines that we saw last year, or we're looking at something new, something substantial in the infrastructure sector, especially in the backdrop of GST rollout and demonetization?
Sure. For me, I think the renewed and continuing emphasis on developing the logistics network and the transportation network in this country and the related infrastructure is going to be very critical. And it is going to be critical for two reasons. One is that India is thinking of, becoming a manufacturing hub in the country. And one way India is going to really achieve that dream, the Make in India dream, is only if some of this actually, enables that to happen. And for that, our logistics network and transportation networks have to increase. The second biggest thing that I feel is this taxation regime, and the quicker the implementation of the GST actually happens, this is only going to, again, facilitate this growth a little faster. Now, let me emphasize on the first aspect, right? So if you look at an economy like India, the World Bank every second year puts out a report and ranks various countries, almost 160 countries on the logistics performance index, and India has jumped. India has jumped almost 16 places. So today I think it is around 35th or 36th in that ranking. However, predominant modes of transportation in our country are road. 65% of the freight cargo actually moves by road. 30% is moves by rail, and a very minuscule 5% goes via all other modes of transportation, which includes inland waterways, air, and coastal waterways, right? And this has to shift in the sense that if you look at most of the developed economies, or even if you look at China, almost 45 to 50% is by rail, and the remaining, the last mile, is by road, right? So to that extent, India really has to start thinking about developing its capabilities in intermodal infrastructure, the ability to do this in very cost-efficient ways, and remove a lot of bottlenecks that are in this particular sector itself, right? This infrastructure for logistics. And to kind of support the other aspect of, creating more manufacturing base over here, I think the emphasis on innovation and entrepreneurship is also very critical. So I'm hoping that that will be continued in this budget.
Sure. Emphasis on innovation and entrepreneurship, I'll come to you, Deepa, for that. But before that, Vaidyanathan, let me quickly come to you. your opening remarks as far as this whole railway sector is concerned, now that you've merged it with the general budget, in the wake of, we've got unfortunately a couple of train derailment accidents. There's a lot of talk that you might have dedicated rail safety funds this time around. Besides that, are we going to have something more different, considering railways has been merged with general? What is expected in the railway space?
So yeah, you're right. For the first time after 92 years, the railway budget is going to be merged with the general budget, and for good reasons, because earlier, way back then, about a century back during the British rule, you had 85% of the budget was basically the rail budget, and now it's spun the other way around. Only 15% of the budget is basically rail budget. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to have an exclusive rail budget when it comprises only 15% of the budgetary allocation. I think there are also basically there are advantages and disadvantages, apart from the fact that you don't necessarily need a separate rail budget these days. The advantage is that railways need a lot of capital expenditure. For instance, last year they had budgeted for about 1.22 lakh crores. So that's a lot of money. That's the amount of money that railways need today to modernize our essentially railway system. Now, how is that money going to come? I mean, so basically it helps if it comes under the larger purview of the budget. I'll talk about how railways can perhaps raise these funds in a while. So let me also set the context in terms of this particular budget, the times that we are in. If you look at the global economy, so I'll talk about the global economy and then I'll talk about the Indian economy as well, demonetization, GST as well. So if you look at the global economy, the World Bank essentially has reduced its forecast for growth rates. The forecast was earlier, a year back, it was 2.9%. Right now it's 2.4%. If you look at the four major economies, so-called BRIC economies, Brazil, Russia, India and China, India is the only bright spot. Brazil and Russia are in recession mode. China, basically the industrial sector is in a problem because of the lack of growth in the global economy. So India is essentially just, that the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. And we hope that in this particular budget, there are no budget cuts which kind of switch off this light at the end of the tunnel. The Indian economy is poised really well. Year before last, we grew at about 7.6%. That's how the GDP grew last year. It was, I think, about 7.2%. And this year, it's slated to grow at about 7.1%. We'll wait for the economic survey to come up with those numbers.
Okay.
So this budget is extremely critical because if you look at the budget next year, 2019 is election year. So, most probably 2018 might be an election budget. I mean, I could be wrong, but, that's
that would be the politics of economics.
Exactly, yeah. So this is really an opportune moment to carry out all the significant reforms.
So basically, in railways, well, this is going to be a big plus. That's the underlying thought when you're merging the whole concept or the ethos behind merging railways with general is concerned.
Yes, and the main benefit is going to be that earlier railway budgets were mainly a political exercise where the railway minister would announce
a populist sort of a thing,
basically for MPs and MLAs, and then you won't basically raise the passenger.
With that. This regime is going to do away with that.
Yeah, and raising of financing used to be done exclusively through the IRFC, what is called as the Indian Railway Finance Corporation, that raises the financing for the railways.
Okay.
But now, given that it's in the main budget, you could raise that through infrastructure bonds. There are more ways of raising financing for railways.
More ways we're looking at in terms of raising finances for railways. Deepa, having said, there's a lot of now focus, perhaps emphasis by the government to switch to cashless economy. When we say that the digitization and the digital literacy, if you remember last year we also talked about it, but now when we have demonetization, such a big exercise, it's got a humongous response across all states. I'm talking to the people of the country. Digital literacy and the allocation to that part of the exercise for startups which are actually promoting which are actually promoting more cashless transactions. We're also considering rural part of India wherein you need to generate that sort of awareness. So overall, digital literacy space, do you think this budget is going to give it also sort of center stage?
I'm hoping it will. I think when you're transitioning from from the economy that we were to the economy that we envision, clearly cashless and digital is a big part of that transition. And we have to acknowledge the realities of connectivity. We have to acknowledge the realities of literacy. We have to acknowledge the realities of access. And therefore, I think two complements are necessary, which is digital infrastructure as well as digital literacy. The government already has plans in terms of the National Digital Literacy Mission, which was, I think, fairly well timed. For instance, the Telangana government plans to educate around 300,000 people just this year under that scheme, and it's a growing target. And at the same time, they're complementing that with access to digital infrastructure and incentivizing telecom providers through appropriate public-private partnerships. Or thinking of innovative ways, for instance, the T-Fiber here, where you're combining the water lines with the cables to bring connectivity into homes. So innovative solutions like that, which at the same time incentivize the private sector to participate in this, would be an essential part of the digital movement, at least. I think there are other implications. I mean, but I'm sure you'll get into it in terms of small, medium businesses, etc. Which are a big part of this solution and impact. But I guess we can talk in terms of the digital map. At least, I think those are my expectations.
Reducing tax burden and widening tax net. Tarun, I can see you smiling already. Now, this tax thing is, a middle-class household, perhaps everybody for that matter, tax mein kya ho raha hai? How am I going to really get benefit from there? What's your assessment? What is expected, considering if you look at the government's clampdown on black money, corruption, etc., and this demonetization exercise, the government's tax revenues have gone up. Does it actually translate into lessening the burden on the common man when it comes to tax? Does this budget, will the budget be looking at that aspect as well?
Let me just pull back a little bit and think about the challenges facing the finance minister in his fourth budget now. The finance minister so far did a great job in making sure that we're meeting fiscal targets and not thinking in populist terms throughout his term in office. But now I think it's more and more challenging as the government starts to get into election mode, looking forward to 2019. The government also faces, and the economy faces, fairly serious headwinds. So far the economy has benefited from low oil prices. That's been a boon to the economy and a gift to the finance minister. But in the future, we don't know which way the oil prices will go. We also see a lot of global uncertainty. Brexit is a big one, and we also see the results of the US election going to play out very soon in terms of US policy, in terms of globalization, barriers to trade, all might affect the finance minister's job going forward. So I think it's very important for the finance minister to use his budget as an opportunity to set things right in-house. And tax policy is an important part of it. Instead of thinking about which industry to favor, which handout to give, I think the finance minister should focus on thinking about the tax infrastructure. That means both expanding the base of the tax collection efforts, demonetization, and digital transactions are going to be a key part of that. And so making sure that the enhanced information that we're getting because of digitization actually translates into a wider tax space. I think that's a key opportunity that demonetization has presented. Let's see how the finance minister thinks about expanding that. The second thing I'd say is that it's critical to make sure that we don't favor one industry or one interest group. We want the finance minister to put in low uniform taxes all throughout the economy.
Milind, your thoughts on it? The tax rate, the tax base, and especially middle class, housing sector, cheap housing.
So, well, I don't...
Because these are all aspirations. I mean, for anybody sitting at home and listening to what finance minister, they would obviously think, where am I going to get benefited from demonetization in the long run? Isn't it?
Sure. So it would be hard to, for me to comment about individual taxes, but of course, if I can save some money, that's great. So I definitely look up.
So would I be saving some money?
But having said that, right, I think for the ease of doing business, I think thinking of uniform taxes and doing away with some arbitrary taxes, I think should be emphasized and implemented. And I think the GST is the right thing. I mean, it has gotten delayed because of the demonetization, and I hope it doesn't get delayed beyond a certain point, because it's just not conducive for doing business in this country, right? And I think that is necessary for implementation.
Vaidya, quickly want to add to
I
it?
could
Yes.
just complement what Tarun said and what Milind said.
Okay.
If you look at the tax collection in India, it's perhaps one of the lowest among the developed countries. So if you look at the tax to GDP ratio, that's about 17%, 16.6% to be precise. And if you were to look at the average tax to GDP ratio of OECD countries, which is 35 countries, that's more than double. That's about 34%. So we do need a widening of tax base, and that's what the whole point of demonetization was.
Yes.
Essentially to get people into the mainstream. So I would expect that, my wish list would be perhaps be to not reduce the, the minimum taxable income, because that keeps the tax base widened. That's not something that the middle class wants. But you can give them SOPs in terms of, you mentioned about affordable housing. One of the things that the Prime Minister announced,
Housing for all by
exactly.
2020. Yes.
Yeah, and one thing that they can additionally do, perhaps to give fillip in terms of financing resources for affordable housing, is to basically make affordable housing an infrastructure sector, as part of the infrastructure sector, because not too much of money flows into that. So if you can raise money from the capital markets for affordable housing by issuing infrastructure bonds, that essentially can help the government achieve the target of 2 crore houses by 2020.
Okay, quickly, Deepa, also whatever you want to add to Vaidya, more funds for PSBs, because they have a huge task ahead for them as far as promoting the less cash transactions, wallets, etc. is concerned. Remember, this is just introduced a few months back, and we have a long way to go. I mean, is it really fair to expect some dramatic add-ons or pluses in this space, or will this budget be touching that bit as well?
So I think, to add to the lower tax rates is, of course, I think, an important element and should be an important element. But I think, this, but this also correlates with the fact that, a bulk of the workers in this economy are employed by the informal sector. Right, so if I have 90% of these people in the informal sector, just bringing about demonetization, we cannot stop at demonetization. I think there is an urgent need to complement that with certain other measures. One is reforming the onerous labor laws that act upon both the employers as well as the employees in the country. So there is, I think there was this great piece by Manish Sabharwal where he mentions that our factories and enterprises burn around 600,000 trees every year in compliance paper. So we file on 5 billion sheets of paper in compliance. So that needs to reduce. And similarly on the workers' end, for instance, there's 45% confiscation of salary which happens for workers who are earning less than 1.8 lakhs per annum. That needs to be addressed, right? So that this movement, so they're now incentivized to stay in the informal sector. So take that away so that they can actually move to the formal sector. There is so these kinds of, I think, labor law reform I think is important. The second, of course, is lower tax rates. And I think in general there has to be all of these things in terms of this movement from the informal to the formal sector can only happen, like what Milind was saying, in terms of building the scale and growth of the formal sector enterprises. And therefore there has to be, I think, a conversation or education reform I think is so necessary. And perhaps Tarun will talk more about
that
it.
was my question. Every time, every budget we talk about more funds, let's promote more IITs, set up more IIMs. Well, that's a mammoth exercise. We really don't go back and take a look at the report card, what and how much has been done. But this government has actually expedited this process. And in this budget, Tarun, your quick take on in the education space, especially setting up of world-class institutions, not at urban India. I'm talking about rural sector as well.
So, absolutely. India's got the largest number of young people in the world in human history. And so we want to make sure that this is going to be an asset, a demographic asset for the next decades. So setting up new universities, increasing the gross enrollment ratio in colleges and universities is absolutely critical. For that, we must make sure that our universities are innovation engines. I have a suggestion for the finance minister. Make sure that to encourage research in universities, offer matching grants. For every rupee that an innovation university or a leading university raises from external sources, match that rupee for rupee out of your own funds. It'll make sure that the resources for research are boom.
Quickly, Deepa, we need to take a break here.
I wanted
Yes.
to just say that, I think so much of the focus on innovation in this country has been about creating this physical infrastructure. I think, revitalizing universities, improving the percent of, GDP spend on R&D, getting, public spend, increasing public spend and not treating R&D as something which is the business of industry. These are all, and just completely revamping culture of even existing universities, like the ones you mentioned, I think is extremely important.
All right, revamping education sector, something has already been done, but is this budget also going to take a relook at the education sector? Besides that, when we take a break and come back, we're going to talk about the ISP students here and take their thoughts on the employability part of the budget and the power sector, and also we'll talk about the healthcare industry, what are their expectations, plus the corporates. You're watching Budget Expectations on DD News from ISP Hyderabad, so don't go away, we'll be right back.
LIC मना रहा है अपनी हीरक जयंती नई चमकदार प्रस्तुति के साथ। पेश है LIC का बीमा डायमंड प्लान, जो लाया है 6 अद्वितीय लाभ, परिपक्वता मूल्य, जोखिम संरक्षण, मनी बैक, विस्तारित संरक्षण, ऑटो कवर और लॉयल्टी एडिशन। तो आइए जिंदगी का जश्न मनाएं।
रोहिणी दिल्ली 2014 डॉक्टर संजीव का अल्ट्रासाउंड क्लिनिक, अपराध लिंग परीक्षण करना। कुरुक्षेत्र हरियाणा 2015 तांत्रिक बाबा, अपराध लिंग चयन में सहयोग व प्रचार। फरीदकोट पंजाब 2014 गर्भवती महिला के पति और सास, अपराध लिंग परीक्षण करवाना।
PCPNDT एक्ट के तहत लिंग जांच या चयन करना या करवाना या इसमें किसी भी तरह का प्रचार या सहायता करना कानूनन जुर्म है। इसमें 5 साल तक की सजा और 1 लाख रुपए तक का जुर्माना हो सकता है। जांच करने वाले डॉक्टर का लाइसेंस रद्द किया जा सकता है। मार्च 2015 तक ऐसे 271 केसेस में सजा सुनाई जा चुकी है। दीवारों के भी कान होते हैं, कब समझोगे? जेल जाने के बाद।
लिंग चयन के विरुद्ध आवाज उठाएं, अपने जिला अधिकारी को तुरंत सूचित करें।
हेलो पापा,
कब से फोन कर रहा हूँ, फोन ही नहीं लग रहा है। अच्छा, घर पहुंची कि नहीं?
रास्ते में हूँ। आज ऑफिस में लेट हो गया था।
ऐसा क्या काम आ गया आज? बेटा 12 बज रहे हैं।
लास्ट मिनट ऑफिस में काम आ गया था, फोन नहीं कर पाई।
अच्छा, घर कैसे जा रही हो?
मैंने टैक्सी ले ली है।
ऑफिस से कोई है तुम्हारे साथ?
नहीं, मैं अकेले हूँ।
अकेली? टैक्सी में इतनी रात में?
अरे पापा, आप सुनो तो मेरी बात। पापा
सुनो, टैक्सी का नंबर नोट करो।
1 सेकंड होल्ड करो।
नहीं, मुझे बताओ टैक्सी का नंबर। चलो।
हाँ, आप चिंता मत कीजिए, मैं आपकी बेटी को ठीक से घर पहुंचा दूंगी।
जितनी ज्यादा औरतें होंगी, ये दुनिया उनके लिए उतनी ही बेहतर होगी। चलिए इस दुनिया में बेटियों की जगह पहचानें।
Here gravity and physics don't call the shots, and sound travels slower than you. This is a different kind of place. That's why we're looking for different kind of people, for whom excellence is not a job, but a way of being, be it in the sky or on the ground. We are looking for an invincible team of invincible people, people who are a cut above.
Join the Indian Air Force to be a cut above.
5 महासागरों में तैरने वाले ये दुनिया की सबसे युवा तैराक है। देश की अकेली ओपन वाटर स्विमर जो अंटार्कटिका में फतेह हासिल कर चुकी है। राष्ट्रपति के हाथों सम्मानित हो चुकी भक्ति शर्मा की सफलता मां की कड़ी मेहनत का नतीजा है। राजस्थान के उदयपुर में स्विमिंग पूल नहीं थे तो होटल में प्रैक्टिस कराई, क्राउड फंडिंग के जरिए पैसा जुटाया और दुनिया ने जाना तो प्रधानमंत्री ने भी हौसला बढ़ाया। ये देश का स्वाभिमान है और हमें इन पर अभिमान है। बेटी बचाओ, बेटी पढ़ाओ।
छुट्टी नहीं है, टॉफी देता हूँ। ये ले बेटा।
ए बच्चा, ये टॉफी इसको वापस दे दे। 1 रुपया छुट्टा दीजिए। इसे रखिए, ये 1 रुपया बड़े काम की चीज है।
प्रधानमंत्री सुरक्षा बीमा योजना है। इसमें हर महीने अगर आप केवल 1 रुपए के हिसाब से यानी सालाना 12 रुपए भरते रहें तो भगवान न करे कभी आपके साथ दुर्घटना हो जाए, आप विकलांग हो जाए, कोई अनहोनी हो जाए तो आपको और आपके परिवार को इस बीमा योजना के तहत 2 लाख रुपए धनराशि मिल सकती है।
तो आज ही इस योजना से जुड़ें।
एक भारत
सरदार पटेल डिजिटल प्रदर्शनी देखने के लिए आप सादर आमंत्रित हैं।
Your business needs a reliable and cost-efficient delivery solution. Introducing Express Parcel and Business Parcel. Your customer selects the product. Our pickup service collects it from you and provides fast, secure and economical delivery at your customer's doorstep. We also collect cash from them and offer you fast cash remittance service. Now enjoy the growth and success of your business with India Post Parcel Services. Keep your business ahead.
अगर सच्ची लगन है और आपका मेहनत है तो आपको दुनिया का कोई ताकत नहीं रोक सकता है।
इस हकीकत को जिंदगी में उतारने वाली ये बसंती है, झारखंड की वो पैरा टीचर जो पिछले 9 सालों से शिक्षा की लौ जला रही है। नवजात की लाचारगी पर लोगों ने जिंदगी खत्म करने की सलाह दी, लेकिन माँ ने किसी की नहीं सुनी। स्कूल भेजा, मैट्रिक पास हुई और उसके बाद बसंती आगे बढ़ती चली गई। टीचर बनी तो सरकार ने हौसला बढ़ाया और देश ने सिर आंखों पर बैठाया। ये देश का स्वाभिमान है और हमें इन पर अभिमान है। बेटी बचाओ, बेटी पढ़ाओ।
Welcome back. ISP Hyderabad DD News is bringing to you this special budget expectations program. Let's quickly take some questions from the audience. Aditya, you have a question on digital governance. Please quickly.
Yeah. So the Digital India initiative is a very grand concept going on right now. The focus is on the cashless economy, but can we also expect something for the digital governance? How the government can, deliver the governance digitally rather than the...
So the National Digital Literacy Mission, I think, has 2 objectives. Of course, so one of them is, to facilitate these changes in consumer behavior, which are perhaps expected as a part of these recent initiatives of the government. But I think another important aspect of it is also consumption of government services. So, as government services move online, if you look at the Mi-Seva centers, and, I just learned today that there is this portal which puts out the volume of digital transaction, and it's grown manifold in the last couple of years. So I think the idea is also for the National Digital Literacy Mission to enable the citizen to consume these government services online, improve transparency and benefit from it through reduced corruption and leakages in the distribution services.
In the last budget, the government had basically said that they're going to set up what is called as the National Agriculture Market, called ENAM, E-enabled National Agriculture Market, so that they know where the surplus are and where is deficit, so that they could basically have the supply chain network going to make sure that the prices are well balanced. Now nothing has happened on that since the last 1 year, so I really hope that in this particular budget the ENAM initiative is taken up, and basically there is a PPP model in which both the private sector and the public sector can participate and make this happen. So I really hope that in this particular budget we see something more about more concrete guidelines on how to actually have this in place.
That's an important point. See, the amount of stuff that is online right now to what is actually offline in this country, the latter is huge, right? I mean, just to give you an example, if you look at just logistics and the amount of paperwork that has to be done in order to transport goods in our country, I think that itself would be a huge cost savings if one could go digital on many of those aspects itself and reduce that time. Today, I think in terms of stoppages, the cost to the economy is close to $6.6 billion just on road transportation.
All right. Quickly on healthcare, Nupur, you have a question, and also if Tarun can address that question. Besides that, insurance policies and healthcare. Well, this is an area where there's always a wish list.
Well, before I ask a question to Tarun, I'll just set the context that the GDP expenditure on healthcare in India is perhaps one of the lowest in comparable countries, and it's just about 1.5% compared to more than 2.5% of even lower income countries. Similarly, when we talk about expenditure on education and medical sector, while a lot of aims like institutions are being announced, but where are the faculty to teach in those institutions? So a lot of the doctors actually, they say that there are no good faculty who are up to date with the practices in the current medical fraternity. So where does that fund come from, and how do you actually attract medical fraternity to teach rather than practice? Because there's huge gap in terms of salary.
All right, Tarun, yes.
So There's some, the government has to recognize that when you think about high quality professionals in, say, teaching hospitals or otherwise in innovation universities, they're going to respond to market forces in terms of salaries. And so it's quite critical if you want the most capable people in either the health sector or in other kinds of university sectors to be in the business of teaching rather than in practicing, then we have to make sure that teaching, salaries for teachers also respond to that. If the, finance minister wants to take the plunge in terms of making sure that compensation for high quality medical doctors to be professors in AIIMS-like institutions is there, I would welcome that tremendously. I think it will do a fillip not only for the person getting that salary, but also in terms of the numbers of doctors that they then train, and make sure that we have the right set of people staffing our hospitals, specialty hospitals, our clinics, PHCs across the country. So I think that is going to be a critical.
But let me just add to that. See, it's not just about salaries. It's also about the autonomy to the institutions in order to choose what they want to be, right? In terms of the research output, incentivizing your faculty and students, PhD students, to actually work on those problems and making facilities available for that kind of research to happen, right? You can't just say that we are going to keep a lot of regulatory barriers and then expect you guys to perform. That's probably a harder thing to do. You want more autonomy for these kinds of things.
Okay, this was about how you generate the world-class practices in health sector, especially the professors and doctors she talked about. What about the healthcare facilities? We have Swati here. She perhaps has a point on that. Yes.
As health indicators improve, and I'm sure they will, life expectancy is also set to improve, which means we will soon have a population which will live probably 2 decades beyond their retirement. And in such cases, if you witness, the older we grow, the more we spend on healthcare. So you will have a population of people who are above 60 and will have increasing expenditure on healthcare at an age when their active income has stopped. Given that social constructs and social support systems of joint family are changing right now, is there a possibility to
any specific panelists
this population in terms of health insurance or any other arrangements which can be made?
Okay, quickly, yes.
I have an important point over here. So I think we should be careful about mimicking the high cost kind of healthcare systems of the West. So we have to make sure that the healthcare system that we develop is relatively low cost, early stage, and oriented towards preventive care rather than more than anything else. So in India we see that type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular diseases are booming, right? And so in order to prevent that, we want to make sure that if our elderly population are going to have actually a high quality retirement, then we want to make sure that there's more prevention on things like diabetes, there's more prevention on things like cardiovascular disease.
If you look at the workforce, currently it's about 51 crores. That's how big the workforce is, and only around 15% of this workforce has what is called as Provident Fund, because they're in the organized sector and they contribute to that. So one of the proposals that was there in the last budget was to essentially allow mutual funds to have a plan like 401k in the US. Okay, so you can actually invest in a mutual fund and you can withdraw only after you reach an age of 60. So that even if your lifespan increases by 2 decades, you have enough money to spend on healthcare and you have essentially post-retirement care. So one of the things that I would hope for in this particular budget would perhaps be that the finance minister essentially allows investment in mutual funds for retirements, which is something that has been pending, and pending SEBI guidelines. So if the SEBI guidelines come through, then that should happen very soon.
What I talked about, when you're taking away that 45% and you're putting it in state insurance schemes, or you're putting it in EPS and things like that, I think you need to give employees the option to do what they want to do with that money, rather than allocating it for them, in these incredibly inefficient schemes.
There is a need to be innovative in this sector in order to address this low-cost healthcare delivery, right? Because I believe that's where India can actually separate itself vis-a-vis what we're seeing in the West, and an emphasis on that kind of innovation is necessary in the healthcare sector, because we are going to face a burgeoning problem of old and they are not going to have the ability to pay at the rates that one would expect them to pay, right? So any scheme, could be through digital cards,
any scheme, yes,
has to be geared towards figuring how does one shift the cost curve itself of delivering healthcare.
Ronak has a question on digital payments. It's a connected question. Yes.
So my question is, to achieve the objective of financial inclusion, don't you think that the government should rationalize the indirect taxes and also the other charges which we see which are levied on the digital transaction payments?
Yeah, I think so. The rationalization on indirect taxes is anyway happening with the GST coming in. So all the excise duty, sales, sales tax, all of that is going to go. On the financial inclusion and basically, reduction of transaction costs. Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, to make it more financially inclusive, the government needs to not just reduce taxes, but also essentially give a lot of fillip to these fintech firms. So allow fintech firms to come up with new technology, provide the ecosystem for them to be able to come up with solutions that work in India. And so that there's a lot more digital literacy and people actually are able to use the JAM, the Jan Dhan Yojana and the Aadhaar and the mobile, the JAM trial, the JAM advantage that that we truly have.
Okay, there's a lot of talk about post-demonetization when we had these IT raids, clamp down on black money. Then this Benami properties, it's always in the news. Gaurav here has a question on the basis of that. Yes, Gaurav, Benami properties and infrastructure.
Yeah, I have the question on real estate basically. So we've seen like a slump in the real estate sector over the past couple of years. There's a lot of unsold inventory in the market, but we also see very less transactions as far as people buying those properties. So there's basically a hold up as far as the real estate sector goes. So what do you foresee as far as this budget is concerned regarding how should the government respond in terms of addressing that slump in the real estate sector?
All right, real estate sector.
One of the things that the government has done, and perhaps it can do some more, is to essentially announce that there will be a 50,000 rebate in taxes if you buy your first house. And they've also announced, in December that if you're buying a property, a first property less than 20 lakhs, then your interest cost is only interest burden is only 4%. And if you're buying a property less than 9 lakhs, the interest burden is 3%. So they are, making housing affordable. That being said, you're absolutely right. There's a whole lot of supply that's there, and there isn't enough demand. So once the price rationalization happens, which would happen given what's happened in demonetization, you would see that pick up in demand.
So Deepa, also Tarun, yes.
Sorry, so I disagree with that. I don't think it's the government's business to solve the slump in the real estate sector. The simple thing is that the reason why there's an oversupply of housing right now is because of poor business decisions made by the developers of this housing sector. And so it's not the finance minister's job to bail out the large developers. It's so the bailout will the sector will fix itself when prices rationalize, i.e. houses become more affordable. That's how we're going to have affordable housing. Prices will drop and now more people will be able to.
I think there is it's not clear what the equilibrium is, and for instance, I think in fact this kind of disinflationary pressure is perhaps good, and for instance, we don't know whether if how these prices have been inflated, why they were inflated, and I think in the long run, we'll find as prices rationalize, the markets will do it. And this is also, if you look at the trickle down to cities, I mean, Manish Sabharwal again had this great article which said that, the problem in India is not, I'm sorry, I've taken his name twice. The problem is not jobs, it's wages. And, a lot of these people, when you take their jobs away because of demonetization or whatever, they're not coming into the cities because you earn 10,000, 25,000 in Mumbai, it really doesn't buy you anything.
So since you said it, demonetization and real estate, Anirudh has a point for you. Yes.
Yeah. So the demonetization has removed a lot of black money, which is in the form of cash. But then, as we know, there's a lot of money still stuck in the real estate sector in terms of land prices. So how should the budget address a problem like this? What can we expect?
Yes, Milan.
Actually goes back to the point that was raised earlier on the real estate. See, why is there such a big glut on the supply side? It's not clear that it was just purely because of the supply-demand mismatch. It may have very well been, that people had money and they put it into real estate and they are creating this hold-up. And unless one side gives in, where now the pressure becomes hard enough that they would want to lower the prices and sell at affordable prices, this equilibrium may never come about to be. Right? So up until that hold-up goes away. So it's not clear to me how much of that real estate that is locked up and not selling is because of just money parked away of this kind. Yeah. And somebody needs to actually think through that aspect and then create policy that can start getting that real estate out into
Deepa, want to quickly add?
Perhaps we don't need a sectoral focus. In general, I think the budget should focus on boosting consumption, and perhaps that's what some of these points relate to. But so I don't know if you're focusing on the real estate sector, but in general, I think there will be incentives in this budget to boost consumption.
Let's quickly take a few more pointers. Ankita, you have a question on tax structure. Yes.
So keeping the GST and the demonetization in mind, so do you think there should be any changes in the basic tax structure to incentivize people to move towards the cashless economy?
Tarun?
In general, I'm not in favor of handouts to any particular purpose, particularly using the tax code as a way to incentivize this kind of behavior versus another. Now, cashless is one way in which people transact. They may choose cash, they may choose cashless. I mean, with demonetization, the government has already given a big incentive for people to use cashless. What I would suggest is that the government basically make sure that a lot of barriers to cashless transactions go away. For example, digital literacy. Do people know how to use cashless transactions? For example, connectivity,
less cash
so on and so forth.
yes.
So, those are the bigger challenges to cashless, not the particular tax rate on cashless transactions.
Yes, Milind, and whether you also, after Milind, yes.
Question in moving to a digital economy and these cashless is, see, as a user of these systems and these facilities, I must feel that it is secure, right? And it is not clear to me as of today what the digital security for all the private service providers is, and including some of the larger ones itself, right? And I think until that assurance doesn't come through to the people, why would I self-select? I would always be hesitant to think about it. So either that assurance needs to come in, as the digital infrastructure becomes both robust, secure and large enough that we can allow for a larger throughput of this. Automatically you would not have to give any SOPs. People will just self-select into these kinds. It's much more convenient to do that.
Quickly, yes, quickly.
Yeah, just to add to what Milind said, I think digital literacy is also extremely important. People need to know how to be able to make those transfers. It's a very simple thing, but people need to know. So any way in which they could basically incentivize people to use more of digital, that would be nice.
Yes. In fact, since we're talking about gender budgeting, gender parity and women empowerment is something every budget has this long wish list here. Urvashi, what is your wish list in gender budgeting, and what do you actually understand by gender budgeting?
So the share of schemes related to women has always been an issue of concern. While there has been a global emphasis on gender budgeting, for India, the allocation of schemes has always been below 6%. There is a dire need of planning, budgeting and auditing various methods to improve gender inequality and to address domestic violence and other issues related to women. So what is the expectation from this year budget regarding this?
In fact, if I may just quickly rephrase it and make it more news-centric, whatever we had in last year's budget, Tarun, Deepa, you were there in fact when we talked about, has that ground been cleared in violence against women and empowering women at the grassroots level, something substantial that we are expecting this time from the Modi government once again? Any one of you?
So let me say, put it this way, that what we're seeing is a twofold economic problem. So one is that we see that women's labor force participation in India is actually collapsing. And so this is a huge economic problem, because you see the most talented people in India, the formal labor force participation is decreasing. And so we want to make sure that women are participating in the economically productive workforce in greater numbers than they are currently.
How do we ensure that participation?
An important part of what Urvashi herself alluded to is things like violence against women. This might seem like a social problem, but I think the finance minister has an important contribution on this. It's very important to make sure that we invest in things like public safety, policing. Even these are not trivial issues. I mean, I think what happens is that in Delhi or in large metropolitan areas, they become much more newsworthy, but it's actually across India issue that we have to make sure that public safety as well as private safety, that the finance minister make adequate allocations towards. Now, of course, the states are also going to have an important role to play, because safety is law and order is largely a state's issue. But insofar as the finance minister can also make allocations towards that, I think that's going to be a critical component of making sure that women's participation increases in the workforce, and also women have a larger role to play in the economy.
Ankit and Komala here. Ankit has a question in the agriculture space. That's something we cannot ignore. Agriculture. Ankit, yes.
I just want to talk about agriculture a little bit here. So as we know, it contributes 17% to GDP, and most like 60% of rural households depend on agriculture. So I just want to talk about role of technology in agriculture space. So we know this sector is not growing, and the product it suffers from low productivity in terms. So do you really think that government should or will provision some special funds to enable these technology startups to take these services directly to the customers, because right now these technologies are a little expensive for them to use. So until the time these technology become commodities, do you think that government will provision special funds to boost these startups and help the farmers?
Deepa.
I think the biggest benefit that the government can do to the agricultural sector is to get people out of agriculture. There are, I think, like for instance, we have around, I said this, I think the last time as well, 200 million people produce the same output that 2 million people do in the US, right? So that's how remarkably unproductive we are. So we need to move people out. But where do we move them to, right? So we move them, you can't move them to services, which itself is seeing a decline in employment because of increased digitization and an increased role of technology replacing labor, right? I think manufacturing is again, this relates to my earlier point, where you have to make mass manufacturing, formal sector manufacturing, be able to expand and grow at a scale where it can absorb these people and also reduce prices, right? That increase in that scale of formal manufacturing will also reduce prices for for the citizens, right? I think so. That's in some sense the two prongs. So you definitely need to make agriculture more productive, but nobody is making that call, right? It's too much of a political call to make. So rather than grant them, subsidies, I think the biggest somebody has to take that hard call in the government, move them out and move them into more productive sectors.
There's one final question we need to take in the space of education. Yes, Komal.
So my question is, basically, whenever we talk about budget allocation towards education, we are looking at increasing the number of IITs or IIMs, or even in the rural India, we're looking at midday meals and encouraging people to come to school primarily. With the whole Digital India campaign, is there something that the finance minister can do to ensure that there is quality education being imparted even in primary school level at even in rural India, because just increasing the number of institutions is not going to really help.
Okay, Deepa.
Education reform, I think, is something that perhaps Tarun's research ties directly to, and he'll better comment on this. But I completely agree that we need. So, for instance, if you look at there have been several stages in education, right? First, we came up with the IITs, then we did privatization in terms of the engineering and some professional education. Then we're looking at broader private sector participation. Now, I think is the time for having fundamental reform in higher education. And all of these moves have been successful. For instance, there's a study here we did at ISB where we looked at privatization of engineering education. And it's had a significant impact on the technological output of the country. It's had a significant impact on industrial output and activity. But now I think all of these questions of entrepreneurship, right? We create the T-hubs of forget the T-hubs, but we create a physical infrastructure, we create the startup, 10,000 crore fund, but who's drawing on that? So unless we create entrepreneurs, unless we create people to populate these are all moot initiatives, and those entrepreneurs will only be produced through, I think, fundamental reforms in higher education. Technological progress as well as innovation require investments in human capital.
So,
very briefly,
let me pick up on the school education aspect of it, which I think you had a very important point about. Today we have huge aspirations for high quality education, and students are voting with their feet. They're leaving the government sector schools. So government schools are seeing a huge exodus of students going over to private sector schools. So consider that this government schools charge a fee of 0. So I'll put it to you in this term. What does it say about the quality of a product when you cannot give it away for free? Right? So this is the quality of education in government schools. The states have an important role to play in improving quality. They're going to be a multifaceted aspect to it. It's very important, say, to have better monitoring. For example, parents should be involved in the education in much more significant ways. The school should be opened up to the parents, which so far it hasn't been the case.
You're talking about a government school, a typical government school in rural India, or?
Absolutely. A typical government school in rural India does not have a lot of of involvement of parents, and so we should increase that. The second angle is from digitization world. I think there's a huge potential for bringing lessons in digital format to rural schools. It's, with connectivity expanding, I think that's a real
provided
opportunity.
the digital literacy is achieved there substantially at the rural level, and then
schools can be sites for all sorts of lessons coming in through satellite, through transmissions.
Right,
through
fantastic.
technology.
Here, all right. We've taken, in fact, many pointers from ISB Hyderabad students in here. Let's take a very short break. When we'll come back, we'll talk about the typical wish list coming in for Finance Minister from ISB Hyderabad. The top 5 pointers from the panelists, especially the impact of demonetization and also the rollout of GST. What's going to be an add-on plus in this year's budget vis-a-vis the wish list of the panelists. Don't go away. You're watching Budget Campus from ISB Hyderabad on DD News.
लाइफ है प्यारी सी, जी लो हंसी खुशी हो, प्लानिंग करो अब लाइफ की।
LIC के न्यू एंडोमेंट प्लान में पाइए बचत के साथ सुरक्षा भी।
सेविंग्स करो, इंश्योरेंस पाओ, घर अपने खुशियाँ ले आओ।
2 हफ्ते से ज्यादा अगर आपको खांसी होगा तो टीबी हो सकता है।
टीबी?
हाँ, तुरंत डॉक्टर से मिलिए और बलगम की जांच कराइए, क्योंकि टीबी जो है
वो किसी को भी हो सकता
है। और अगर हो गया तो बिना भूले पूरा कोर्स करिए, और नहीं किया ना तो इसका इलाज करना बहुत मुश्किल हो जाएगा मेरे हीरो हीरा लाल।
चलो।
2 हफ्तों से ज्यादा खांसी, तुरंत डॉक्टर से मिलिए और बलगम की जांच कराइए। टीबी हारेगा, देश जीतेगा।
रोहिणी दिल्ली 2014 डॉक्टर संजीव का अल्ट्रासाउंड क्लिनिक। अपराध लिंग परीक्षण करना। कुरुक्षेत्र हरियाणा 2015 तांत्रिक बाबा। अपराध लिंग चयन में सहयोग व प्रचार। फरीदकोट पंजाब 2014 गर्भवती महिला के पति और सास। अपराध लिंग परीक्षण करवाना।
PCPNDT एक्ट के तहत लिंग जांच या चयन करना या करवाना या इसमें किसी भी तरह का प्रचार या सहायता करना कानूनन जुर्म है। इसमें 5 साल तक की सजा और 1 लाख रुपए तक का जुर्माना हो सकता है। जांच करने वाले डॉक्टर का लाइसेंस रद्द किया जा सकता है। मार्च 2015 तक ऐसे 271 केसेस में सजा सुनाई जा चुकी है। दीवारों के भी कान होते हैं, कब समझोगे? जेल जाने के बाद।
लिंग चयन के विरुद्ध आवाज उठाएं। अपने जिला अधिकारी को तुरंत सूचित करें।
सब ठीक है
डॉक्टर साहब, हाँ बताइए ना, कृष्णा जी ही होंगे ना? मैंने तो बहू से पहले ही कह दिया था, चाहे कुछ भी हो जाए खानदान की नाक नहीं कटनी चाहिए। लड़की है तो आप ही कुछ उपाय बताइए ना।
देखिए, आप
पेमेंट की चिंता मत करिए।
ऐसी ही सोच से शुरुआत होती है कन्या भ्रूण हत्या की। ये सोच भी हत्या के समान है। अपराधी कड़ी से कड़ी सजा के हकदार हैं।
बेटे की आश में बेटियों को बलि मत चढ़ाएं। भारत की आन बान शान में हमारी बेटियों का भी योगदान है।
मम्मी मम्मी, आपके पास आधार है और पापा के पास भी, तो फिर मेरे पास क्यों नहीं?
क्योंकि तुम अभी बहुत छोटे हो।
टीचर कह रही थी मेरा भी आधार होना चाहिए और चुटकी का भी।
जी हाँ, नवजात शिशु का भी आधार बन सकता है। इसके लिए आधार केंद्र अथवा स्कूल या फिर आंगनवाड़ी में लगने वाले शिविर में जाएं। ये पूरी तरह से निशुल्क है।
मेरे बच्चे की सही शुरुआत, मेरा आधार मेरी पहचान।
रोहिणी दिल्ली 2014 डॉक्टर संजीव का अल्ट्रासाउंड क्लिनिक। अपराध लिंग परीक्षण करना। कुरुक्षेत्र हरियाणा 2015 तांत्रिक बाबा। अपराध लिंग चयन में सहयोग व प्रचार। फरीदकोट पंजाब 2014 गर्भवती महिला के पति और सास। अपराध लिंग परीक्षण करवाना।
PCPNDT एक्ट के तहत लिंग जांच या चयन करना या करवाना या इसमें किसी भी तरह का प्रचार या सहायता करना कानूनन जुर्म है। इसमें 5 साल तक की सजा और 1 लाख रुपए तक का जुर्माना हो सकता है। जांच करने वाले डॉक्टर का लाइसेंस रद्द किया जा सकता है। मार्च 2015 तक ऐसे 271 केसेस में सजा सुनाई जा चुकी है। दीवारों के भी कान होते हैं, कब समझोगे? जेल जाने के बाद।
लिंक चैन के विरुद्ध आवाज उठाएं, अपने जिला अधिकारी को तुरंत सूचित करें।
Here gravity and physics don't call the shots, and sound travels slower than you. This is a different kind of place. That's why we're looking for different kind of people, for whom excellence is not a job, but a way of being, be it in the sky or on the ground. We are looking for an invincible team of invincible people, people who are a cut above.
Join the Indian Air Force to be a cut above. 2 हफ्ते से ज्यादा अगर आपको खांसी रहा है तो टीबी हो सकता है। टीबी? हाँ, तुरंत डॉक्टर से मिलिए और बलगम की जांच कराइए। ठीक है। टीबी किसी को भी हो सकता है। अगर हो गया तो बिना भूले पूरा कोर्स करिए और फिट हो जाइए। नहीं किया तो इसका इलाज बहुत मुश्किल है। समझ गए भाई साहब आप? आइए। 2 हफ्ते से ज्यादा खांसी, तुरंत डॉक्टर से मिलिए और बलगम की जांच कराइए। टीबी हारेगा, देश जीतेगा।
People think techies are chained to their desks. Not me. I run UAVs. You know, drones. I have to say, it's pretty awesome. I grew up playing video games. And who would have thought that'll help me defend my country? Not my mom at least. We get there first and see what's around the corner so that there are no surprises for the rest of the team. We go everywhere, working with the latest and the best technology. But no Facebook.
We are India's most exciting workplace and we are making you an offer. The Indian Army. Live a life less ordinary.
भाग भाग, अरे भाग! ओहो, चप्पल नहीं पहनी पकड़ा गया ना। देखा आपने लापरवाही का नतीजा है। ऐसे ही पोलियो की खुराक न लेने से पोलियो आपके बच्चे को पकड़ सकता है। भारत पोलियो मुक्त है पर दुनिया नहीं। ये वायरस दोबारा देश के अंदर प्रवेश कर सकता है। इसलिए जन्म से लेकर के 5 साल तक हर बार अपने बच्चे को पोलियो की खुराक दिलवाइए।
राष्ट्रीय पोलियो चक्र 29 जनवरी 2017।
2 बूंद हर बार, जीत रहे बरकरार।
Welcome back. Let's quickly get on to the panelists. This is the last faggot of the show. In fact, Milan, quickly coming to you, demonetization, GST rollout, its impact. How do you see? What's your wish list for the FM?
Okay, so quick things. First, I hope that the finance minister doesn't divert away funds from what is necessary for the country in order to give out SOPs for demonetization and its impact to take care of its short-term impact. Second, I would say that the quicker we get to GST and in its complete implementation, the better off we are going to be. The third is that do not lose focus on Make in India, entrepreneurship, innovation, and building this logistics infrastructure in the country, because that is going to be the backbone to, take our economy from here to the expanded economy that we want it to be.
Brilliant, Vaidya.
Okay, first one would be capitalization of banks. Put in adequate capital to make banks healthy again. Second, invest more in infrastructure. Give more funding to National Infrastructure Fund. Third, increase incentives for people to invest in bond markets, i.e. develop bond markets. Number 4, disinvestments in public sector firms like Air India, Ashoka Hotels.
Deepa, whole demonetization in some sense has set the stage for this transition from the informal to the formal sector for enterprises. So 63 million, we have just 1.5 million enterprises that pay Provident Fund and 17,000 which have a paid up capital of 10 crore or more. So I want to see more transition in that direction, and I think that will come from labor market reform, both at the employer and the employee's end, and lower tax rates, much more investments in human capital, so much so that I think we should have surgical strikes in education. Some
Surgical
really
strikes in
radical reform
education.
in education is required.
Big reforms in education. Tarun.
Okay, so I want to emphasize one issue which got knocked off the headlines when demonetization came about, which is the recovery of the non-performing assets of the public sector banks. We have to make sure that major task is not left uncompleted. It goes hand in hand with the development of a corporate bond market and reducing the frictions to making sure that happens. Labor market reform is incredibly important, but it has to also then go simultaneously along with social social insurance programs to make sure that the people who suffer in the new economy are also taken care of, including the very young as well as the very old. The third and most important thing is that if I was the finance minister, I would bet on the young people of India.
Okay.
That means health and education are the number one and number two priorities for the finance minister, because they're the highest returns in the economy so far. So making sure that we have a healthy population and a well-educated population with high-quality schools and universities is, I think, priority number one.
Priority number one, besides everything else, coming in from one of the panelists here, healthy India and especially young population is worth investing a lot. And in fact, yes, the voices from Hyderabad, ISB also endorse, I'm sure, whatever wish list has been endorsed by the panelists. Well, many thanks. Let me quickly thank Milind Sohani, Faculty Operations Management, ISB Hyderabad, for joining us. Many thanks, Vaidyanathan. Thank you very much for talking to us. He is a visiting faculty at ISB, a resident faculty at ISB and visiting faculty at Connecticut University. Deepa Mani, many thanks, Executive Director in Faculty Information Systems, ISB, and also Tarun, many thanks for joining us, Faculty in Economics. And thank you very much, above all, my ISB Hyderabad audience. Thank you very much for joining us on this show. Well, that's it. In the backdrop of the, remember when we started the show, we talked about the budget expectations narrative in the backdrop of GST as well as demonetization. Perhaps here they're saying that yes, if Finance Minister is listening to them, please invest in Young India also, besides everything else. And yes, demonetization has and will be a big plus, and it will be reflective in this year's budget as well. Once again, thank you very much, all of you. And many thanks for tuning in to DD News from me and my entire team from ISB Hyderabad and also from Doordarshan Hyderabad and the entire team at the panel. Thank you for tuning in. Namaskar.